Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. It's time to look at another Devblog for the upcoming event Tokushu Heiki, and this is for a Battlecruiser. It's for the Kurama, and it is going to be for Japan and rank 5. Once again, an event vehicle, so therefore you won't be able to get it fully spaded, and also won't have premium bonuses, but I'm sure some people will be into it, and also, maybe this is the namesake of the event, or maybe there's some other stuff going on as well. Usually these events have 4 vehicles. This is probably going to be the Grand Naval Prize. It doesn't say the main Naval Prize, so I'm guessing this is going to be the only one, but we'll have to see going forward how many prizes turn up. Let's get into the history of this behemoth. Kurama, the second Ibuki-class battlecruiser, was launched in October 1907, with the name Kurama given to it after Mount Kurama in Japan. During the First World War, Kurama was used to a limited extent in operations in the South Pacific in search of Admiral Spee's fleet, and then to cover landings on the Mariana and Caroline Islands. After the end of the war, Kurama was transferred to the Northern Fleet, where it provided cover for Japanese landing forces during the intervention in Russia. In 1922, it was disarmed under the terms of the Washington Agreement, and then subsequently scrapped for metal. So the Kurama is coming in, and it's got a pretty odd armament, if I'm honest with you. They mainly compare it to a vehicle which is already in the Japanese tech tree, and unfortunately, when it comes to this vehicle, the good old Akoma, the Akoma also suffers when it comes to its weaponry, and you can kind of see why. So for the Kurama, your main armament, you have 305mm guns, which are fantastic. You know, they're going to put some very large holes in some enemies, but you only have 4 of them, and in 2 dual mounts, one on the front and one on the back, and this is very similar to the Akoma. It's also very similar to the Glorious, meaning that you shoot your guns, and then you kind of sat there for however long, not really doing anything. Now, luckily, when it comes to War Thunder now, they did make it so you can control your primary and secondary armaments at the same time, so you can at least do something while you wait for your main caliber guns to reload. But what's interesting about this vehicle is they don't just have the 152mm in casemates along the kind of blisters of the ship. There's 3 either side, so not a huge amount, but still enough to do something. There also is some 203mm guns on it in these little turrets on either side. So basically, you actually have, it looks like 4 turrets of these 203mm. So in a broadside, you don't just have the 4 305, you also have 4 203mm and also 3 152s. So there is a decent amount of firepower here, but is it enough to kind of bump it up in BR compared to the Akoma? That's really the question right now, because the Akoma, I believe, is actually set at 5.7 at the moment because of the fact that it has that big donk, and then after that big donk, it don't have no much. You know, the Glorious is the same. Stuff like the Graf Spee is the same as well. You fire the guns, and then you just kind of sit there and wonder about life, and I feel like the Kurama is going to be very similar than that. The other thing is, since this thing was scrapped in the 20s, it probably doesn't have a great AA armament. There does seem to be at least a few guns around the place, but nothing too crazy. You know, just a few standard auxiliary guns here and there, and so I don't really imagine this thing having a lot of brute AA, and also at the same time, it's going to be so slow to move around the battlefield, and that's obviously going to be a bit of a problem. The top speed being 39.3 kilometers an hour, or 21 knots, is really slow compared to pretty much all the other machines that this thing is going to face. That means that it's going to be an easy target for bombs, and also an easy target just to be able to hit. Now, it does actually have a lot of armor on it, that actually kind of helps it. It does have more armor on the bow and stern of the vehicle, so therefore its survivability will be a bit higher. It does have 2 big shoot-me spots, obviously under the turrets, and it's not going to be too hard to hit those turrets, which may be a bit of a problem. But at the end of the day, at least it's just another ship that's around the place. Now, I thought when it came to this event, the Tokushu Heiki event, they were going to have kind of a barnstorming vehicle for Japan. And I know a lot of people will think this one is barnstorming, but to be honest with you, if I compare this to previous events and also squadron vehicles of Japan, it's quite weak. Stuff like the Shimakaze and the Udachi are just fantastic vehicles at their roles. They do a wonderful job. And then also you had even some higher tier ones which also have been able to do a lot of good stuff. This vehicle, unfortunately, because of where War Thunder is right now, is going to sit in a really weird place. If they stick it at 6.0, it'll just be food for other battlecruisers and battleships. And if they stick it at 5.7, it probably will never die, but also, once again, will it do enough damage with its guns to justify it even being on the battlefield? And when I've seen these machines which have not necessarily a ton of armor, but they just have a set of big guns and really nothing else, what ends up happening is you're just kind of sat there for most of the game, not really doing much, watching the battle go along. It's kind of like playing stuff like some SPHs in the game or ATGM carriers, where you kind of go to a position and you wait, and then you shoot every so often when you see people moving around. The Battlecruiser is exactly the same, apart from you moving at about 20 knots while doing it. For me, it's nice to see this thing. I just wish that maybe there was something a little bit more mobile, something a little bit quicker, not necessarily more heavily armed, because if you actually line up these guns properly, you will do a ton of damage. I just wish that these vehicles here were ones which came at least partially modded, and, you know, they were just a little bit more fun to enjoy. This vehicle, being at 5.7, will just be better than the Akoma, so I'm worried that they're going to put it at 6.0 because of that, and also it's just going to be a pain to spade because even though they've reduced the need for parts and FP on these machines, you just don't have enough armament to be able to put out a ton of damage, so getting a ton of score is going to be tough. The main thing you're going to aim with these guns is you're just going to try and knock ammo racks, you're going to try and just hammer stuff like that, and sometimes it'll work, but also you'll be facing a lot of cruisers, specifically from America, and also the Soviets, which have a ridiculous fire rate. So no matter how much armor you have, they will just knock out general parts of you, whether it's the turrets or whether it's other parts, and you will just die by volume of fire. And as a person who's been playing around that BR more recently, the main thing that is important is just volume, getting them downfield and annihilating stuff. That's why a lot of the higher tier cruisers for America are incredibly strong. Stuff like the Helena, the Fargo, and then of course stuff like the Des Moines as the same time. So the Kurama coming in, it's beautiful, it looks nice. The paint scheme on it is kind of completely ridiculous. It's all over the place. I just really wish it maybe had one more main turret in the center, or maybe just some more guns on the side. Not just 4 203s, and then of course 4 305s. Doesn't really fill me with a lot of hope for the machine, especially with how War Thunder Naval is played at the moment. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Brendan Quinn, Vilneus, Character Fuel, Juan the Panda, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Merciless Reaper, Orange Tail, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Moxie, B. Young, Bareen, Peter Grayling, Alan Hacker, Sem Alslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R., and also Lafouche for supporting the channel.